Hello, this is the Harboring Light. I'm Mary. I give a conservative perspective about the world around me. So my social media links will be provided for you in this episode, along with Substack, email, and also buy me a coffee. That all those links will be provided for you. And feedback is important. Can't stress that enough. So give me a rating. Be greatly appreciated on all the platforms that I'm on. Appreciate your rating. And also feedback through email. So, audio platforms. I'm on Audible, Amazon Music, Spotify for podcasters, Overcast, Pocket Cast, Pandora, iHeartRadio. And I'm definitely looking to grow to wherever you enjoy your podcast content. I am on that platform. So this episode is about Peter Seeger. This is about his solo career. And Peter Seeger, he was in the group The Weavers. So I'm going to talk about the background is his solo approach as a solo artist, and also mix in with the background when he was a part of the Weavers, and along with my thoughts. All right, so let's dive in. All right, so how I'm going to approach this, I'm going to start out with talking on the background, and then I'm going to go back after I speak on the background, go back to the inputs and the thoughts on his place in the Weavers, and then also go back and readdress that, and then go back and readdress the being a part of the, hold on, let me get my thoughts together on that, about the Almanac Singers, about Woody Guthrie, and give more tidbits, more details, that is, about the populist political parts of that, and then go back to the tones as far as all the ties, again, with the communist ties, and all the issues with that, and everything with the Committee on Un-American Activities and the blacklisting and so on. All right, so here we go. Seeger sustained the folk music tradition and was one of the principal inspirations for younger performers in the folk revival of the 1960s. Seeger was born to a musically gifted family. His father was the influential musicologist Charles Seeger, and his mother, Constance, was a violin instructor at Juilliard. But it was perhaps the introspective poem of his uncle, Alan Seeger, that most inspired Pete's songwriting. Leaving Harvard after 2 years in 1938, Seeger hitchhiked and rode freight trains around the country, gathering country ballads, work songs, and hymns, and developing a remarkable 5-string banjo to answer that. In 1940, he organized the Almanac Singers, a quartet who also featured the folk singer and composer Woody Guthrie, and appeared at union halls, farm meetings, and wherever his populist political settlements were welcomed. The group disbanded soon after World War II. In 1948, he formed another group, the Weavers, with Lee Hayes, Ronnie Gilbert, and Fred Hellman, which achieved considerable success on college campuses, in concert, and on several records Shortly after the group achieved national fame, however, a great deal of controversy was stirred up concerning Seeger's previous activities in left-wing and labor politics. The Weavers suddenly found themselves blacklisted by much of the entertainment industry, finding it increasingly difficult to make concert bookings or sell records. The group broke up in 1952, but reunited 3 years later when a Christmas concert at Carnegie Hall sparked new interest in their music and message. Seeger left the group in 1958 and disbanded in 1963. The Weavers gave 2 reunion concerts in 1980, and a motion picture documentary about the group, Wasn't That a Time, was released in 1982. After the 1950s, Seeger usually worked alone or with his family. Brother Mike was a member of New Lost City Ramblers. Sister Peggy, a singer and multi-instrumentalist, became one of the driving forces behind the British folk music revival with Ian McCall, her partner in life and in music making. As a solo performer, he was still a victim of blacklisting, especially after his 1961 conviction of contempt of Congress stemming from his refusal in 1955 to answer questions posed to him by the House Committee of Un-American Activities concerning his political activities. Although Seeger's conviction was overturned, the following year in the appeal process for several years afterward of this, the major networks refused to allow him to make television appearances. In later years, the controversy surrounding the performance gradually subsided. He was a beloved fixture at folk festivals. Seeger was given major credit for fostering the growth of the hootenanny, or as known, a gathering of performers playing and singing for each other, often with audience participation. This is a characteristic of informal and personal style of entertainment. Among the many songs that he wrote himself or in collaboration with others were Where Have All the Flowers Gone? If I Had a Hammer? Kisses Sweeter Than Wine? And Turn, Turn, Turn. And then to add on to this, you see how all of these influence goes into the 60s, because Where Have All the Flowers Gone? This song was resurfaced again in the 1960s. And To Everything, Turn, Turn, Turn. This song was resurfaced again in the 60s by the category of folk rock. Very interesting. All right, so and then go on from this, in 1972, the Incomplete Folk Singer, a collection of his writings on the history of folk songs, civil rights, and performances in his lifetime. In the 1970s and the 1980s, he was active in a program to remove pollution from the Hudson River, building the Hudson River Sloop, Clearwater, promoting festivals for its maintenance, and engaging in environmental demonstrations, particularly anti-nuclear ones. During this period, Seeger also performed regularly with singer-songwriter Arlo Guthrie, which is Woody Guthrie's son. By the 1990s, Seeger had transcended the accusations of the McCarthy era, and he was regarded as a cherished American institution. The motto inscribed on his banjo, "This machine surrounds hate and forces it to surrender," seemed to have been proven correct. In 1994, he was awarded a National Medal of Arts, the first of many honors that he received as the century approached its turn. Seeger was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1996, and the following year, he received his first Grammy Award for Peach of 1996. In 2009, he won a second Grammy at the age of 89. Very impressive. 2008, which was in 2008 when this was released, a collection that found the artist approaching his 90th birthday with an undiminished spirit and hope. In 2010, he released Tomorrow's Children, an album dedicated to environmental awareness that Seeger recorded with the Rivertown Kids, a group of students who attended middle school near Seeger's home. The album won a Grammy for Best Musical Album for Children in 2011. Seeger's musical autobiography, Where Have All the Flowers Gone?, a singer story song, Seeds, was published in 1993. All right, so here we go. I'm getting into the blacklist, and I'm talking about the House on the American Activities Committee. I'm resurfacing this because in the Weaver's episode, I addressed this as far as the complications and the issues that they faced because of this. All right, so this is on his part for Peter Seeger. Several of Congress' convictions and the blacklisting of many who refused to answer his questions, highly controversial for its tactics, HUAC was criticized for violating First Amendment rights. Its influence was waned by the 1960s and in 1969. It was renamed the Internal Security Committee, and in 1975 it was dissolved. Peter Seeger was still a victim of blacklisting, especially, again, as I mentioned, after his 1960 conviction. All right, so let me dive into the more aspects and more details about how this committee seeped into television and the U.S. history and its impact. And television in the United States, the Red Scare showed that employed a blacklist of individuals where a performer or a member of the production staff, they were afraid of having their products associated with anything un-American. Sponsors would often respond by either firing the suspect from the show they were producing, or if they were sponsoring a show produced by. And I'm going to details of this and explaining this so you see the ramifications of the Un-American Activities Act, and also to add on to this, the whole issues with mass hysteria. All right, so let me continue on. The paranoia was fostered by the anti-communist movement, which became known as the Red Scare. It affected television differently from the way it had affected the movie industry, because TV was financed by advertising dollars. Anti-communist groups would get quick results by threatening to organize boycotts of the goods produced by the sponsors of a show that employed a blacklisted individual, whether a performer or a member of the production staff. Afraid of having their products associated with anything un-American, sponsors would often respond by either firing the suspect from the show they were producing of, if they were sponsoring a show produced by the network, asking the network to do so. As early as 1947, 3 ex-FBI agents began publishing Counterattack, the newsletter of facts on communism, which gathered the names of employees in the broadcasting industry who had appeared in publications, at rallies, or on petitions of a leftist nature. The publishers sent counterattacks to television executives and sponsors, and called for those listed to be fired immediately and treated as traitors. By the 1949 through 50 season, Ed Sullivan, host of the very popular Toast of the Town, was using counterattack to determine whether he would clear a guest for an appearance on his show. In June of 1950, the publishers of Counterattack issued a compact, user-friendly guide that listed 151 entertainment industry, that is, employees whom they suspected of communist activities. The pamphlet, Red Channels, the report, Communist Influence in Radio and Television, included many well-known writers. And I'm going to list some of them as stated: Orson Welles, Edward G. Robertson, Burgess Meredith, Ruth Gordon, Leonard Bernstein, Aaron Copland, and, of course, Peter Seeger. And also, to add on to this, Lena Horne. And Lena Horne is in the category of singers. Decision makers at advertising agencies and networks read the report, which caused the cast and staff of several shows to be charged and which destroyed several careers. One owner of a chain of supermarkets threatened to condemn by placing a sign on product displays at companies that supported programs with companies whose names had appeared in the counterattack publications. Network advertising agencies and sponsors all became concerned about the negative effects these and other tactics might have on their businesses. The network began to make efforts to stop the problem at its source, hiring special employees to investigate and approve each potential writer, director, actor, or anyone else who was an applicant for a position. So I'm going to end this segment by saying this. Either on both sides, Democrat, Republican, it's just not wise to attack something or to go in fear to go in fear and act in fear. And out of acting in fear, you cause a lot of destruction. And I think it's just better to assess everything and really think about and see things for what it is and try to get outside of your own prejudices and ignorance. You know, that can be a thing that's easier said than done, you know, for different situations. But in the end, it's the better road to take. All right, so let's get into the other segments. So I want to wrap up by saying these things and then expanding on that as I'm wrapping up everything. So I think it's quite interesting, Peter Seeger being associated with the almanac and everything else, that with the lineage with Woody Guthrie. As I mentioned Woody Guthrie in previous podcast episodes, the aspect of people coming together and as a group singing and giving their observations about the world around them, and just traveling and talking about the plight and the realities of man. And then it's fascinating how folk music, to me, has that unique touch of stepping into the soul and recognizing the aspects of noticing and the benefits of noticing everything around you. I think this links to the aspect of the effects that spiritual music has in its place in society. And so, being also to add on to this with the populist movement is very interesting. It reminds me of The Wizard of Oz, because I was interested when I was in high school. I had a very wonderful history teacher, and it sparked my interest about actually wanting to read the series of books, The Wizard of Oz. And the movie version doesn't really do it any justice, but it's one of those things where you gotta understand, adaptation versus the reality of what it's based on. You gotta separate those two and just go from there. I understand that on the other corners of that, of being frustrated with, particularly in movies and directors and producers and maybe actors and so forth, taking liberties and not sticking to the originality. And sometimes, I get it. They can really take things too far and just mess up their whole aspect because they want to push a certain agenda. But let's go back. I get the aspect, but most of the time, it's good to just separate the two and say, okay, So, going back to The Wizard of Oz, when I found out and I understood, and I did more learning and research upon, what my history teacher was teaching us, what she was saying, how The Wizard of Oz was written and everything is based on the populist movement. The populist movement has to do with particularly with the farmers taking a stand against being controlled and finding their place and finding their own ground with capitalism and not being pushed aside and being ripped apart by the harsh reality that can unfortunately happen with capitalism. But we also can't deny the benefits and the need and the sustainability of capitalism, and that's the great point about it. Also, that it delves deep within, and that society goes crashing down without the capitalist parts, but it's up to us to make the best of the situation in capitalism. And I think it's also interesting how it delves deep within and talking about the aspects of growing up and passing the torch to another generation to go on the exploration of discovery and finding and looking into the world for what it is and understanding those things. And I don't want to get too in depth about the book. For those who haven't read and are interested, I would greatly recommend that book. It's wonderful. It's a masterpiece. And I think that all of this just delves deep and centers around the aspect and the great nature of folk music. It takes mundane things. It takes the harsh reality of things. It takes happiness. It takes everything, all the aspects in between about being human and the emotional levels of being human, and saying us as people, where do we stand on this? How do we see ourselves in this? How do we see ourselves in the situations when things go wrong? How do we see ourselves in the situations when things are positive? How do we see ourselves in the situation when we think about children, when we think about our children, when we think about future children, and think about the world around us, and centered around how our generations and our future and how we will develop and grow. All right, so there you go. I'm going to do a little tidbit and explaining about that and how everything else evolved with as far as breaking down the dictionary aspects of how it's explained about with the populism and everything else, and wanting to know your thoughts and everything else. Either email me or so forth about that if you have extra thoughts. So, this is how it goes. It said, a member of a political party claiming to represent the common people, especially often capitalized. A member of a U.S. political party formed in 1891, primarily to represent agrarian interests and to advocate the free coinage of silver and government control of monopolies. A believer of the rights, wisdom, or virtues of the common people. See, that again, taking a stance with people, everyday people, regular people, and their plights. Okay. Sentiments, all right? An attitude, thought, or judgment promoted by feeling, a specific view or notion, or the opinion of emotion. They were welcome, and all of this was expanding and after World War II. And it's very interesting how all of this with the breakdown of society, particularly with Germany and the Nazi, all the chaos and destruction with the Nazi movement and everything else. And it's been interesting, the two differences. One populist movement standing for the common people and understanding their plight, but on the other hand, all the destruction and the mass destruction, and it wasn't all in Germany, but it leaked. It was the harsh reality of the madness of World War II and all the other things that were going, Pearl Harbor and everything else, and how the socialist movement, then thinking you're superior beyond other things, and how it rips down society when you have a disdain take that of imperialism, and then that I'm better than a certain race. And it's just a unfortunate example of what can happen when you have those sort of attitudes. All right, so this reaches the end of the Harboring Light. So on Wednesday, I'm going to talk about artists that I think relay to Peter Seeger. And then on Friday, I'm going to go in more depth about his body of work. All right, so tune in, turn up, and definitely take care. Bye-bye now.